We are back. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the FF Ballbusters podcast. Sorry for the brief hiatus that we kind of took. I think it's been 2 or 3 weeks or so since we've released a video. Will and I both had some real life stuff to kind of attend to. I moved across the country. As you can tell, I'm in a different spot. Blank walls right now, but I'll be working on that. But really excited to be getting videos back out for you guys and excited for this one today as well. We got an interesting list that we found on Twitter from an account that we highly suggest you go follow. We're going to give our takes, our opinions, and our Dynasty kind of perspective on this list. But before we do, Will, do you have anything to say to the people?
Absolutely, guys. Make sure you keep doing that great YouTube stuff. I know it's been a while, but we're back at it again. We're not going to be stopping anytime soon. We're finally settled in, so we're back for the long run. So make sure you keep doing that great YouTube stuff. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way you know when we drop all of our latest videos. And with that being said, let's get into it because it's going to be a fun one.
Absolutely. So as I alluded to, the account that I'm talking about on Twitter is from Coach Speak Index, a great resource that you guys should absolutely go follow. He kind of takes, or he watches like all of the press conferences, all of the media time from coaches and offensive coordinators, breaks it all down, takes all of the fantasy relevant and important information and provides it to you guys. And he also has a database that goes back years to determine whether these coaches are reliable sources of information when they're talking to the media, so you know whether you can trust them or not. So I think that he's a fantastic resource. Definitely go check him out. But this list today that we're looking at was something that he put out in regards to best ball values. But I think a lot of this can translate over to the dynasty landscape as well. These are guys that he feels like, from his work and from what he's heard from coaches so far throughout minicamp and this offseason, guys that are undervalued in best ball drafts and best ball tournaments. So we're going to talk about how these guys are valued in Dynasty. The first guy up on that list is going to be Kyren Williams, a guy that's probably the highest profile name on the list, the guy that's probably the most polarizing on the list. So Will, I'll throw to you. How has our opinion on the channel kind of changed throughout the offseason on Kyren, and where do we stand now, you think?
So with Kyren Williams, it was sort of an interesting situation with him. He burst onto the scene this year after having a great breakout season, and he was valued somewhere around like the Dynasty RB5, which we saw that and we were like, well, let's pump the brakes a little bit. I feel like this is a really high price for a Kyren Williams. It's a really high value for a Kyren Williams, and we felt like that's going to be the highest his price is going to get. We felt like they were going to bring in competition at some point, and even if they didn't bring in competition at some point, for him to be valued that high, I don't believe that was going to be super sustainable. But with that prediction of them bringing in more talent, with them bringing in Blake Corum from Michigan, it does kind of muddy the waters a little bit, and it did bring down Kyron's price. But with that being said, this does kind of open sort of a window, which Eric is going to kind of allude to now, which we're going to roll into.
Yeah, so we've gone from sell high to a place where I felt like he was maybe valued reasonably, and I still think he's kind of in that window, but maybe there's a little bit of a buy chance depending on your league and where guys value him. Something specifically from Coach Speak Index that we saw, Les Snead, GM of the Rams, put something out in an interview that they drafted Corum not so much as a replacement or as competition, but more so to not run Kyren into the ground. They really like what Kyren brings to the offense. They trust him completely, and they want to continue to ride him as a workhorse, but they needed somebody who they felt like had a similar skill set and that could fill in the case that Kyren went down, which we saw last year. They had to bring in guys like Darrell Henderson, Royce Freeman, Zach Evans, and they said, never again. We're bringing in somebody else that can actually fill those shoes or at least get close to it. So all of that kind of talk gives me confidence that Kyren's still going to see a significant workload and be the leader of this backfield.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% believe that as well. It also helps, like you said, they brought in Blake Corum, who none of these running back prospects were really, doorbusters, but at the same time, him alongside the rest of them, nothing super spectacular, but he is a reliable option to have in there for that depth piece. And like you said, very similar skill sets between the two. Blake Corum, sort of in a weird way, sort of a Kyren Williams light. There's similar builds as well. It just kind of fits for the team. So it made sense for them to bring him on board and have him in a spot where he doesn't have to be exceptional. He can just fill in where he needs to. And Kyren can take the backfield where, he needs to. And like you said, I feel like this brought his price to a place where it's actually sort of reasonable where he's at now. This sort of, I think he's somewhere around like the RB9 spot now, which is a lot
Yep.
more reasonable than an RB5 price.
Yeah, and like, 4 spots might not seem like a huge drop off, but if you look at KTC's like value points, he dropped nearly 1,000 value points from his peak this offseason to his lowest trough post draft after they brought in Corum. And that might seem like an arbitrary number, but to give context to that, that 1,000 points is the difference between Kyren Williams and Trey Benson right now on Keep Trade Cut. So he lost that amount of value from where he was. I think that makes him much more palatable as somebody to go trade for in Dynasty, especially because I think we're kind of coming around to the fact that in Dynasty you want to treat running backs pretty similarly to how you do in redraft, at least as a somebody that's competing. If you're in rebuild mode, obviously you want to stray away from that. But yeah, I think he's somebody that's at least worth targeting depending on who owns him in your league.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree. So the Kyron Williams price looking pretty decent right now. Not exactly like you
Yeah,
said, not exactly a go grab him right now. You need to absolutely go buy him. He's a value, but
yeah,
like it's interesting though.
it's in a palatable spot for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. So let's stay within the running back landscape here. We're going to drop down a couple names, skip a few. I wanted to talk about Ty Chandler. I think that Ty Chandler is definitely an under the radar guy that is priced really, really low right now outside the top 50 running backs. That's definitely worth looking into. We'll start with his competition, Aaron Jones, who I think is definitely the better running back. I don't think there's really any question. Aaron Jones is fantastic, but he's also 29 years old. He has a history of soft tissue injuries, and he missed 6 games last year. And not just that, but there were also another 5 games that he played in where his snap share was below 50%. Um, so I think that there's definitely going to be an opportunity at some point throughout the season for Ty Chandler to be the RB1 or at least be the lead back in a committee for that team, which is going to be valuable for a competing dynasty team. Um, the coaching staff continues to support Ty Chandler and talk about how much they believe in him. And so I think even if Aaron Jones stays healthy the entire year, like he's going to be involved in some capacity. And he showed last year that he is capable of handling a bigger workload if given that opportunity. And then the last point that I kind of want to bring up is on a team that's either going to be trotting out Sam Darnold or rookie JJ McCarthy. I could see them leaning on the run game a fair amount. Like we're talking about Kevin O'Connell, we're talking about a team with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, eventually T.J. Hawkinson. They're not going to stray too far away from the passing game, but it's probably not going to be like what we saw with Kirk Cousins last year.
No, I 100% agree. I think Ty Chandler, in terms of skill sets as well, he's another guy who matches up pretty well with Aaron Jones, who can sort of fill in when need be. If he does get banged up, like you said, he's getting older, stuff like that. And also, I feel like they mentioned any of the other running backs that are there that are in that backfield, in that room, they're sort of just complementary bonuses or depth pieces. Like if they can get anything out of them, great, but they're really looking towards those two guys to really provide for them. So I am looking forward to Ty Chandler. And like you said, outside of the top 50 running backs, very cheap price for him. Very cheap.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you look at comparable trade assets on KTC, you can easily get him for a third straight up. And if that's too expensive for you, you can probably get him for less if you include him as like a throw in and a package deal. He's somebody that I think you can get for pennies, and especially on a competing team, like we mentioned, which is going to be the case with a lot of these guys. It's definitely worth it at that price point.
Absolutely agree. Which is going to actually move us to another running back who's also right outside the top 50, who's a little bit of an interesting case as well. It's going to be Rico Dowdle of the Dallas Cowboys, who, if you're looking at the Coach Speak Index and stuff like that, according to press conferences with Mike McCarthy, so what the cool thing about Coach Index as well, they let you know based on the coach how reliable the information is they give, and they give you a
Right.
percentage. So like Mike McCarthy in this instance, they gave him a 90% reliability rating based on depth chart stuff. And when he was talking about Rico Dowdle in one of his press conferences, he mentioned that he would be one of the lead guys in that room. Now, did he say he's going to be the lead guy? No, he didn't specifically say that, but when you're looking at the competition for Rico Dowdle, you're looking at guys like you're looking at Ezekiel Elliott, who's returned back to the team, who has lost a step, obviously, since he entered the league, has still found roles and has still found success in the league. I'm not going to take anything away from him, but not the same guy he used to be. You got Deuce Vaughn back there, who I don't even really know what they're going to do with Deuce Vaughn. He's kind of
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know what they're going to do with Deuce Vaughn.
They
And,
they've been talking about throwing him into the slot some, which like, what are we talking about? Like, none of that's gonna happen.
Yeah, they're still finding a place for him in there. But when it comes to
Yeah.
Rico Dowdle, even when it came to last year, people were asking about how much burn he was going to get. And at the time, Mike McCarthy said he was focused on Tony Pollard as the lead guy, and that reigned true for the rest of the season. But Rico Dowdle did get more and more burn as the season went along. So taking that momentum going into this one, I think there's a lot of room for Rico to be towards the top of this depth chart, at least in the 1A 1B spot with Zeke. Now, are
Yeah,
the
I
Cowboys going to
couldn't.
be good too? I don't know about that either, though. You know what I mean? So it's tough. But
I
I
mean,
think
I
he'll
think
be
that
fine.
offense is going to continue to run. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if they continue on a similar pace that they did last year, I think that he's a fantastic pick where he's going right now. You mentioned Zeke, like whether or not he's the 1A or 1B, I don't think it really matters that much.
Mm-mm.
If you're going to get approximately 50, maybe 45% of the backfield touches in a high scoring, high efficiency, high pace offense, I think that that's going to be plenty for a guy that's priced as low as he is right now. You mentioned the competition. Deuce Vaughn isn't going to be a competition for carries, maybe for back like third down or pass catching role, but even that I think is going to be limited. Royce Freeman, Malik Davis, like those guys are so far in the rear view right now. Like when we talked about Rico last year, he was competing with those guys to have that backup spot.
Mm-hmm.
He's really separated himself clearly based on coach speak and what you said as well. So yeah, I really like where he's at right now, and I think he's got a good chance, especially if Zeke doesn't stay healthy, which has proven to kind of be the case. He's worn down a lot these past couple of years. That he could have a really, really valuable role.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree.
So I like that one a lot. Another running back that you wanted to mention and that I also think is interesting is Kamani Vidal. So I'll let you lead that one off as well.
So with Kamani Vidal, he's currently ranked as the RB 45, somewhere in that range on Keep Trade Cut. And when it comes to the Chargers backfield right now, obviously they brought in J.K. Dobbins. They have Gus Edwards back there. The thing that kind of pushes Kamani Vidal ahead for me and just makes him a more interesting prospect, someone you should look into to getting on your depth chart, getting on your bench, I think it doesn't really sound like J.K. Dobbins is fully up to speed, and that's 100% reasonable. He's coming off an
Yeah.
Achilles, not an ACL. He's coming off an Achilles tear, which is serious stuff. With that being said, I haven't heard anything about Gus Edwards at all. I haven't really heard any real Gus Edwards news. I've heard maybe a little bit that he's there and he is participating with the team, but nothing
Yeah.
spectacular. But when it comes to Kamani Vidal and all the news that we've gotten about him, so far he's having a great camp. They said he's running through arm tackles. He's just doing all the extra stuff you're supposed to do. When it comes to pass blocking and picking up blitzes, he's doing a spectacular job with that as well,
That's
which is
huge
something
for
you
a
want to
rookie.
see out of a rookie as well. So I think that stocks could be going up on Kamani Vidal sooner rather than later. So this may be your opportunity to get on him before he does start to rise up these ranks a little bit more.
Yeah, I completely agree. He's a guy that we shouted out as a late round value in your rookie draft, so I hope you took advantage and were able to get him on your team through that route. But if there's anybody that believes in the comeback of J.K. Dobbins, believes that Gus
Mm-hmm.
Edwards is still going to kind of supplant him as that number one guy, which, maybe he starts the season that way. Maybe that's how we get through the first month or so of the season. That might be the case. But I do think that Kamani Vidal is talented enough and has that all-around skill set to be the lead back in that backfield that we've alluded to all offseason with Jim Harbaugh and offensive coordinator
Greg Roman.
and Greg Roman. They're going to run the crap out of the football. They're going to run it all day and tomorrow. And so any piece of that offense, any piece of that running game, even if it's not, the workhorse, I think is going to be really valuable. And again, at RB 45 prices, give me that all day.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's transition to the wide receiver position. We'll go to the second wide receiver that Coach Speak has on the list here, Chris Godwin, a guy that I'm really, really intrigued by heading into this upcoming season. The coaching staff has been incredibly vocal about their plan to get Godwin back into the slot where he's at his best. Liam Cohen, the new offensive coordinator who's coming over from the Rams coaching staff last year, mentioned specifically that he wants to get Godwin into positions that they put Cooper Kupp in LA. So that's really encouraging for me. Last year under Dave Canales, Godwin only ran from the slot on 37% of his routes, which was by far the lowest rate of his entire career. And unsurprisingly, led to his lowest fantasy finish in terms of points per game since his rookie season. And as you can see in this tweet from Guru Fantasy World, Godwin had been at a 63% slot rate or higher every year since 2019 and hadn't finished below wide receiver 17 in points per game prior to last season. And then he dipped all the way down to wide receiver 35 with that heavily reduced slot rate. So I feel like if that slot rate jumps back up, we're going to see that fantasy production jump back up as well.
No, I absolutely agree with that too. I think a lot of people think that because he did, have the season he had last year, they think that he kind of took a step back, which I don't really think is the truth at all, really, especially from a talent standpoint. I was looking into his stats as well. I didn't know he was second in the league in total route wins with 304, and he was second in wins against man coverage with 51.2% and 59.1% versus zone. So he's still out there getting open as well, still routing people up. So I think this is a great value. He's outside of the top 40. If you got a team that's contending, I think he's a guy that you really do want on your team.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think he's sitting right around wide receiver 45 on Keep Trade Cut. Him
Yeah.
and Deontay Johnson are back to back. Two of my favorite wide receiver values in all of Dynasty right now. We've talked about Deontay in other videos as well,
Yeah.
but yeah, we're targeting those guys for sure. So if you can get them on your roster, try to do that ASAP. We can move a little bit further down the list here to one of our favorite rookies, Jermaine Burton, is sitting there producing well in camp for the Bengals, but I'll let you talk about him. He's one of your highlighted guys.
Yeah, he's doing well so far in camp. He's another guy who's right outside that top 50 for the wide receivers. So he's like currently at the wide receiver 56 on Keep Trade Cut. The reason why he's here on this list is because this week, as of right now, we're recording this on June 13th. T. Higgins has not been at training camp yet. He is yet to show up. They haven't discussed the contract with him. I'm sure he's not very happy with that. I know he said he wanted to get the ball rolling on that. There's also rumors that Jamar Chase is discussing his contract with the team first. So I'm sure he's not very happy about that as well, considering that his is actually right here and Jamar does have that little bit of extra time left. So, in my opinion, it's not really looking like T. Higgins is going to be there with the team. This kind of holdout season right now. Do I think he's not going to be there for the whole season? I really have no idea. That's just speculation at a certain point. It probably behooves him more to return to the team at some point. But with that being said, I don't think past this year T. Higgins will be there. And if you can get a guy like Jermaine Burton, who's currently the wide receiver 56, who's primed to be in a spot where T. Higgins is the wide receiver 2 for this team, and we feel like Jermaine Burton is a guy who didn't really get a chance to show everything he's got in the tank in college because weird team situation, quarterback play, stuff of that nature. He's one of those guys who's flying under the radar, and I feel like this is an opportunity to buy in on him before he could skyrocket. Because even in these first couple of games, if T. Higgins isn't there and he gets the opportunity, he could take it and run with it because he is a very talented dude. He's one of the, like you said, we feel like he's one of the guys who is one of the more talented in this draft class. In your model, he ranked very high out of these guys as a very underrated prospect as well. I think it's one of those perfect storms for sort of a Puka Nakua situation, really, if we're looking at it like that. Not quite as dynamic, maybe, but a situation where it's a guy who is rated as low, who could end up rising up boards very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I can draw that comparison for sure. I'm not going to put the expectation on him to have that kind of season, and I know that you aren't either. But yes, somebody who was well under the radar that people didn't have as like a high-end prospect coming into the draft process that I think could vastly outperform that kind of perspective. And also, you talked about T. Higgins not being at camp, but even if he does return, which I feel like we probably expect him to, I feel like that's the most likely outcome. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. I'm not predicting that he's going to be hurt or miss a ton of games, but the track record is that he's probably going to do that. And so Jermaine Burton is going to have at least a handful of games throughout the season where he's operating as the wide receiver 2. And also, like you mentioned, if they expect T. Higgins to not be back, if they don't get that contract talk figured out, they're going to want to put Jermaine Burton out there in positions that he's going to be in for the rest of his career because he's probably going to be the wide receiver 2 going forward. So regardless of whether you're on a competing team or on a rebuilding team, I think Jermaine Burton's guy to go target.
Absolutely.
All right, and that will lead us into our last player on the list here. We're dropping down to the tight ends. Coach Speak listed 3, but Jonnu Smith is one that really, really interested me on this list. Mike McDaniel, in a press conference, was asked if the addition of Jonnu Smith... what?
Just go ahead. I want to hear what you got to say real quick.
Oh, okay. He was asked if the addition of Jonnu Smith signified a change in the way that tight ends would be used in this offense, considering how little that group has produced for them since he's been the head coach. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not saying exactly what he said, but basically he said, yes, it's your job as a coach to work with what you have, and kind of threw Durham Smythe under the bus and was like, he's not really cutting it. He's not. He didn't say that. He didn't mention him by name, but said, work with what you have, and what we had wasn't cutting it. And so now they bring in Jonnu, who's much more dynamic as an athlete, as a route runner, and he also brings one of McDaniel's favorite skill sets to the table, which is yak ability.
The yak master.
That's what he called him.
The
yeah,
yak
yeah.
master.
He said he's mastering the yak, and he said, I took from it that in an offense that puts so much stress on speed and run after catch ability like the Dolphins do, I think Jonnu will fit in perfectly. And there's also opportunity for him to produce. Like, even though Tyreek and Waddle soak up a ton of targets, there's very little pass catching competition behind those two guys that I feel like Jonnu would have to beat out in order to be fantasy relevant.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that behind those two, he is the clear number 3, possibly even number 2, depending on what Jalen Waddle shows up, any given week.
Let's not.
So you know what I'm saying? Just a little bit.
Jalen Waddle's a dog.
It depends on who shows up on a week to week. But
if Waddle's on the field,
but Jonnu Smith does provide something that this offense didn't have with that number 3 option, with an actual tight end who is competent. Again, no shade to Durham Smythe, but again, it is what it is, and he wasn't doing much.
There's some shade.
So,
there's some shade.
But at the same time, I am looking forward to a Jonnu Smith. Where is he valued currently amongst the tight end landscape?
I can try to pull it up. I don't have it in front of me.
Jonnu is currently the tight end 36.
That's low.
He is currently the tight end 36 on Keep Trade Cut. So if we're talking about values, that's a guy you could probably get for dirt cheap.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's kind of shocking to me, actually. 36 behind Luke Schoonmaker? Like, what are we talking about? And he's about to turn 29, which for a tight end, like, that's not even that old, especially for one with the to that he's had. Like, he hasn't been used a ton.
Especially the last few years. He's kind of been taking the last couple of years off since he left the Titans, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and he showed that ability when put in the situation to succeed, what he can do with the Titans. He was a very fantasy viable tight end. He was one of the best. He was kind of a league winner, a guy that was well outside of people's radars to begin the season and really took off. So I think that there's a chance for that to happen again in one of the league's best offenses.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting for Jonnu Smith going forward.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think that will round things out. That was 7 players that we think are potentially undervalued in dynasty leagues. And if you do play best ball, obviously Coach Speak would suggest that you go draft them in those tournaments and those leagues as well. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something. If you have any questions about these players or anything that regards to your dynasty teams, let us know down in the comments below. We'd be more than happy to answer you and help you out with all of that stuff. All the things that Will said at the top, if you can continue to support us, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button. That would mean a whole lot to us and would help us out a ton on our journey to continue to grow the channel. But I think that's all I have. Will, do you have anything left to say to the people before we head out?
Yes. Make sure you guys check out those links in the description below to our sponsors over at Do Numbers and Choice Music Group. We always play music after there, so make sure you check that song out. And check out the merch like Eric's wearing over there. Yeah. That numbers lie. Numbers don't. What the hell? Whatever. That hoodie over there. Why lie? Numbers don't. God. There we go. I'm sorry. My brain got scrambled. But with that being said, make sure you guys check out the link to the Discord as well. I promise I can actually talk in there. But we got a community there where, guys are talking fantasy all the time. So make sure you join up with that. And, yeah, we're having a great time. And with that being said, if you guys made it this far into the video, as always, we love you. And we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.
I promise the next one will be better.
We hop out who is them, tell them all, bitch, I'm